Okay, so, you sent us quite the challenge this time around. It's a deep one.
Oh, yeah.
Stephen F. Kaufman's modern take on Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
Right.
And we know this isn't exactly, light beach reading or anything like that.
Oh, not yet.
But that's kind of why you're here with us on the deep dive, right?
Absolutely.
You want to kind of cut through all that density and get to those core insights.
Yeah.
Those powerful strategies that really apply way beyond just military campaigns and maneuvers and all that.
Absolutely.
Our mission today is to extract that essential wisdom for you, leaving you feeling, sharp and informed, not, bogged down in, all the details.
Yeah, The Art of War holds this, legendary, almost mythical status, and for good reason too.
Right.
And while the historical figure of Sun Tzu himself might be shrouded in, mystery, the relevance of these principles, it can't be overstated.
Right.
What makes Kaufman's work particularly interesting, I think, is that he really focuses on applying these ideas to the modern challenges that, face intelligent people who seek an understanding of conquest and the application of it. And he really goes, I think, above and beyond, battlefield tactics and into this underlying mindset that really drives success in any kind of competitive environment, whether that's business or negotiation or even personal development, and his background as a martial arts master, a Han Shi, really adds another layer to his interpretation.
Absolutely. So we're not just talking about some kind of dusty old academic exercise here in ancient history or anything like that. We are after those surprisingly applicable takeaways about strategy, leadership, and navigating conflict effectively.
Right.
And all seen through, Kaufman's very direct and practical lens.
Absolutely.
So, okay, let's dive right into book one.
Okay.
Considerations and estimations for war.
Right.
Right away, Kaufman presents this idea that conflict, in a broad sense, is actually this necessary engine for growth.
Right.
So it's not always, about physical battles or wars or anything like that.
It's about overcoming challenges.
Right, exactly.
At every level.
So it's like, conflict just in terms of like just opposing forces or even like
competing objectives.
Yeah, right.
And navigating those situations. And resolving those tensions.
Right.
That's the crucible.
Yeah.
Where progress is really forged, for an individual, for a team.
Yeah.
For a larger organization.
Right.
And Kaufman really stresses the importance of being ready for whatever comes your way.
Yeah.
Having the frameworks in place to be able to pursue your goals effectively. And that kind of leads into this crucial role of a leader who can make decisions without hesitation.
Absolutely. And he starts out with this idea of the morality of the project.
Yes.
Which isn't about, good versus evil or anything like that.
No.
But it's about really understanding your what and your why.
Your what and your why, exactly.
Do you really grasp the objective that you're going for?
Yeah.
And even more importantly, do the people that you're leading, your team, your collaborators, do they genuinely believe in it as well?
Yeah. Do they have that buy-in?
Right. And he even says, do you believe in yourself as a leader?
Right.
So that internal and external alignment almost seems like...
It's absolutely the foundation.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So think of it like, that core belief fuels sustained effort and earns, that crucial buy-in that you need.
It's the bedrock of any, successful venture.
Right, exactly.
If that fundamental why isn't solid, if you don't have that shared conviction and that deep-seated belief, then whatever you're trying to build is inherently unstable.
Right.
And he even emphasizes that, this belief needs to be strong enough to inspire commitment and even sacrifice from the people that are following you.
Absolutely.
So, kind of raises a question for anyone in a leadership role.
Yeah.
Are you just issuing orders?
Right.
Or are you actively cultivating that essential buy-in and that shared purpose?
Then he moves into the atmosphere and general attitude.
Yes.
Which this feels, less like, grand strategy.
Right.
And more about the really crucial...
ground level reality.
Yeah, the nitty-gritty, timing.
Yeah.
Having alternative plans ready.
Having those backup plans.
Yeah, right. Making sure that, your people have the resources they need.
Yeah, making sure everybody's fed.
Yeah. Secure supply routes.
The supply lines are secure.
Yeah, so it's all about building that solid operational base for any undertaking. And he warns that, if you don't have these practicalities in place, your own people can become your biggest problem.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even, the most brilliant strategic vision can completely collapse if you don't have those fundamental logistics handled.
Right.
And it really underscores that, a leader's responsibility to anticipate potential problems and ensure that, the necessary support structures are in place.
Absolutely.
It's not enough to just have the big picture.
Yeah.
You have to manage the details of the execution.
Point 3 is the ability to stand alone.
Yes.
Now, this isn't about being, isolated or recluse or anything like that.
Right.
But about, having that capacity for independent thought and decision making.
Absolutely.
The ability to kind of navigate the situation.
Yes.
And extract yourself if necessary.
And if necessary. Yeah.
Right. And he also mentions, having room for renegotiation to kind of, safeguard the overall plan.
Right.
So it's all about maintaining that flexibility. And not being boxed in by, your initial actions.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you have this tension between unwavering resolve and essential adaptability.
Right.
You need to be firm in your objectives. But also pragmatic enough to adjust your approach when circumstances demand it.
Right.
And that ability to renegotiate speaks to a level of strategic foresight, anticipating potential shifts and having, alternative paths forward.
Right. So like in a business context, that would be like,
Exactly.
having a really clear vision for your product.
Yes.
But being willing and ready to pivot your marketing strategy if if that initial approach isn't working.
Exactly.
Then he goes into the importance of control over delegated authority. Now, this isn't about...
It's not about micromanaging every little detail.
Right. But making sure that,
But making sure that the people that you empower are competent.
Yeah.
And that they're aligned with the overall goals.
And that they understand what's going on.
Exactly.
And then that directly relates to how your people perceive you. As someone who's both compassionate and strong.
Right.
Fair, humane, and genuinely concerned for their well-being.
Yeah.
And he says if that trust isn't there, your plans are going to struggle. To gain any traction.
Yeah, that really highlights, I think, the human element in any endeavor.
Yeah.
People are far more likely to follow someone they respect and believe has their best interests at heart.
Right.
And that's a recurring theme, I think, throughout Kaufman's interpretation.
Right.
Is this foundational importance of leadership character in achieving strategic objectives.
Point 5 takes a bit of a darker turn. Doing whatever is necessary to achieve your goals while carefully considering the reactions of those not directly involved and the potential long-term consequences of dishonesty. So it's a pragmatic, almost.
Ruthless point.
Yeah, ruthless point.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that, pursuing objectives can have wider impacts.
Yeah.
And even seemingly supportive parties, might turn if they feel sidelined.
If they feel sidelined, exactly.
And the warning about lying that, its discovery is inevitable.
Right.
And retribution will follow.
Absolutely. And this raises, I think, important questions about, the ethics of strategic action.
Right.
And Kaufman's interpretation doesn't shy away from the less palatable aspects of conflict.
Yeah.
he's really forcing you to consider, I think, the potential for unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And that enduring damage that dishonesty can inflict.
Right.
Even if a lie offers a short-term advantage, the erosion of trust can be, catastrophic in the long run.
Absolutely. Yeah. Then we move into this section on the warlord's general philosophy. And even when you're,
even when you're deposing.
Yeah, deposing or reassigning, individuals, maintaining a degree of their dignity is important. And, if you can't completely eliminate an adversary, providing for their basic needs can actually
be a strategic move.
Yeah, a strategic move.
Yeah.
And he also notes that, those that you've overcome, if they are given some kind of role in the new order, that they need to be able to adapt.
They have to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
The changed circumstance.
Yeah, and this demonstrates a perspective that extends beyond, just the immediate victory. Yeah. It's about, the long-term stability of the environment that you're creating. Treating those you've defeated with a measure of respect can prevent lingering resentment and future resistance.
So it's a strategic form of pragmatism.
Absolutely. Then he goes into a whole section on managing people effectively, matching individuals.
So the right tasks.
The right tasks, yeah. Providing balanced feedback.
Yeah.
With both,
Praise and constructive criticism.
Yeah, and constructive criticism.
Absolutely.
Treating your staff as equals, in terms of their inherent worth.
Yeah.
But recognizing that necessary hierarchy.
A hierarchy.
Of authority.
Yeah.
And he stresses, the logical order of these ideas that you can't really skip ahead.
Yeah, you can't skip ahead.
He even touches on the leader's own well-being.
Yeah.
The need for
clear authority.
Clear authority and conviction and, the value of focused, uninterrupted reflection.
Yeah.
So these sound like,
fundamental principles of good management. That are applicable in pretty much any field.
Yeah, absolutely.
These aren't just military concepts. These are core principles of effective management in any, complex organization. Understanding, individual capabilities.
Yeah.
Providing constructive feedback. Maintaining a clear structure. And ensuring, the leader's own mental clarity. These are universally applicable for achieving goals.
Then he connects careful consideration with assurance of victory and this interesting idea that a leader must project, different facets to different people.
Different faces to different people.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But while staying true to your own core values.
Yes.
And maintaining, decisive action.
Right. So it's this.
So it's like a
delicate balancing act.
Yeah, it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
Projecting an image that inspires, confidence and loyalty. But remaining, authentic. Yeah.
And capable of making those tough calls.
Right. It speaks to, the art of leadership.
Yeah.
Understanding how to communicate and connect effectively with diverse individuals.
Yeah.
While still adhering to, your fundamental principles and maintaining that crucial decisiveness, indecision, he says, can be fatal to any endeavor.
And then comes the rather stark advice about rewarding loyal followers generously and consistently.
Yeah, but not too frequently.
Right. And swiftly removing those who aren't, aligned with the mission.
Right, those who can't be trusted.
Right, or can't be trusted.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty cutthroat.
Well, it's a very pragmatic, albeit harsh perspective on maintaining unity.
Right.
And eliminating, internal threats.
Right.
And the emphasis on, decisive action.
Regarding those that aren't on board.
Right.
Really underscores, I think, that critical importance of trust.
Yeah.
And a shared purpose in these high stakes environments.
And then he says that, compassion should be reserved for those genuinely in need.
Right.
and offered with
measured leniency.
Yeah, measured leniency, not as indulgence.
Right.
And a strong caution against altering your strategy.
Just to curry favor.
Just to curry favor, yeah. And also a warning about the dangers of mistaking wishful thinking.
For actual hope.
For actual hope, yeah. So it's all about...
It's about maintaining, the clear objective focus on your objectives.
On your objectives.
Yeah.
And then finally in book 1, we get to this, crucial element.
Deception.
Of
Deception.
Yeah.
After all the preparation.
Yeah, after all the preparation.
And considerations.
All the considerations. It emerges as a primary tool. Appearing occupied while strategically positioning.
Right.
Leading the adversary to believe one thing.
Yeah.
While preparing to strike from another direction.
Right.
Constantly keeping them off balance.
Yeah.
This is classic Sun Tzu, isn't it?
This is classic Sun Tzu.
That masterful strategy prioritizes shaping perception.
Over brute force.
Over brute force.
Yes, and deception is really the art of creating a reality where victory is inevitable before the first blow is even struck.
Exactly. And he gives all these examples like feigning assistance.
Yeah, feigning assistance.
Attacking from unexpected angles.
Right.
So it's all about...
It's about misdirection.
Yeah, misdirection.
And deception, is a cornerstone of strategic thinking.
Yeah.
It's about, creating this divergence between the opponent's perception and the actual reality to gain a decisive advantage.
He cautions against underestimating the enemy, no matter how well your deceptions are working.
Right.
So it's this crucial reminder not to let your own success lead to complacency.
Right. You can't afford to be complacent.
Right.
No.
And then he details the strategy of mirroring the enemy's movements.
Right.
While simultaneously outmaneuvering them.
Outmaneuvering them, yes.
And maintaining complete commitment from your own forces.
You have to have buy-in from everybody.
So it's about...
Reacting.
Yeah, reacting and adapting.
Reacting and adapting.
But always looking for that superior position.
Right, that idea of mirroring while outflanking, really illustrates that balance between responsiveness and initiative.
Right.
You're carefully observing and understanding their actions.
Yeah.
But you're also proactively seeking those opportunities to gain a strategic advantage.
And then we encounter the more, unconventional tactics.
Unconventional tactics.
Of insulting and belittling the enemy.
Yeah.
Subtly. With seemingly foolish bait.
Yeah.
Projecting an image of incompetence. Even by insulting their families.
Right.
All designed to provoke those...
those impulsive actions.
Yeah. It sounds...
A bit underhanded.
Underhanded.
But again, Kaufman's interpretation doesn't shy away from, these more aggressive psychological tactics.
Right.
The goal here is to destabilize the enemy's mental state.
Right.
To goad them into, making errors based on emotion rather than rational thought.
And then there's the wisdom of, allowing the enemy to essentially defeat themselves.
To defeat themselves, exactly.
Issuing flawed commands.
By issuing inappropriate orders due to their own,
their own indecision.
Irresolution.
Right. Keeping them in constant motion, creating distractions, sowing discord, and then,
Yeah, and then there's even more disturbing suggestions of poisoning supplies and using disease.
Yeah.
It paints a pretty grim picture.
Grim picture of warfare.
Yeah.
In this context.
In this context.
But the ultimate objective is complete incapacitation of the enemy, including neutralizing potential allies.
Right.
Underscoring the often temporary nature of alliances. And book 1 concludes with that essential instruction.
Study deeply.
Study deeply. All right, so let's move on to book 2.
Okay.
Preparations for war.
Right.
It starts out with the absolute necessities, resources.
Yeah.
Food, ammunition, money.
Food, ammunition, money.
Right, but Kaufman also...
But he also...
highlights the potential downside of having too much.
Too much of a good thing can be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it can hinder your ability
to move swiftly.
To move swiftly. Yeah. So it's all about finding...
It's about finding that equilibrium.
Yeah.
You need fuel for the journey.
Right.
But too much baggage slows you down.
Exactly. And he breaks down, proper rationing.
Yeah, he talks about food for marching.
Food for marching.
Weapons for combat.
Weapons for combat.
Money for rest.
Money for rest.
Emphasizing the specific importance of each of those things.
Yeah.
at different stages of the operation.
And the critical need
Yeah.
to secure all supplies before any engagement.
Yes.
And to maintain reserves for unforeseen circumstances.
Absolutely.
It's about
anticipating.
Yeah, anticipating the unexpected.
The unexpected.
Building in
Those layers of redundancy.
Yeah, layers of redundancy.
Right.
You know, that reserve capacity is crucial for resilience.
Right.
It allows you to adapt to setbacks.
Yes.
And maintain momentum.
Yeah.
Even when things don't go according to plan.
And that's crucial,
Yeah.
that reserve capacity
Right.
that allows you to adapt to those setbacks and keep your momentum going.
Right.
Even when
Don't go according to plan.
aren't going exactly as you envision them.
Right.
Yeah.
Kaufman stresses that entering any conflict without a mindset
Geared towards total victory.
geared towards total victory is pointless.
Yeah.
No half measures allowed.
Measure.
You know, he says if the complete defeat of the adversary
Right.
isn't, you know, the primary objective,
Yeah.
it's going to erode your own team's morale.
Yeah. Your team's morale.
And external observers are going to perceive that.
Exactly. They're going to see that
Lack of commitment
the lack of commitment.
and potentially, you know, exploit that weakness.
They exploit that weakness.
Right, so there.
It's that unwavering focus.
Yeah, unwavering focus on victory.
But victory,
is almost presented as a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
You know, if your own belief wavers,
Yeah, if your own belief wavers,
your team will sense it.
your team will sense it.
And your opponents will seize on that doubt.
Exactly.
Then he goes into the significance of,
He talked about
you know, familiarity with the terrain
familiarity with the terrain.
and the necessity of those
lightning fast attacks.
lightning fast attacks
Yeah.
built in a meticulous plan.
Yeah. Meticulously crafted plans.
Absolutely.
Favorable ground for maneuver is essential.
Yes,
He even makes this bold assertion
it does.
that a true understanding of these principles
Right.
should mean that you don't even need reinforcement
Right.
for that initial strike,
For that initial strike, right.
provided your planning is flawless.
Right, and that just underscores the
Yeah.
importance of detailed planning and thorough preparation.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
if you really internalize these principles
Yeah.
and execute them effectively from the outset,
Yeah.
you know, the initial impact should
Yeah.
be decisive.
Right.
Reinforcements might be necessary later.
But not if,
If those opening moves,
if those opening moves are executed with precision.
then he covers the necessity of having
Yeah.
more than enough force for the task at hand.
More than enough.
Yeah, and ensuring all essential provisions
Right.
are carried directly with the troop.
Carried with troops, yeah.
He highlights the high cost
Right.
and unreliability of sourcing supplies locally,
Sourcing locally, yeah.
while also emphasizing, you know,
But he also emphasized
the importance of maintaining positive relationships
Right, with the
local populace
Right.
while still exercising caution in fully trusting them.
Right.
So offer them some resources,
Yeah.
but be prepared to eliminate those resources.
To eliminate those resources
If they refuse to cooperate.
Right.
Another instance of, you know,
of principle.
pragmatic, albeit harsh advice.
Pragmatic but harsh advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's this balancing act between
Balancing act between
securing your own needs
Right.
and, you know,
and managing the local population.
and managing the local population.
Yeah. He acknowledges their self-interest. Right.